The stage, the company's first crown ambassador, Mr. Jason OToole.
All right, you guys having fun? Ready to take a couple of notes, maybe?
Maybe.
$10 million, right? Still hasn't set in. Still hasn't set in. Well, guys, you know, I want to spend about 30 minutes or so here with you and cover a little bit of a topic that, you know, was instrumental in getting where Jennifer and I am today. It was a little bit of a revelation for myself. It took me a long time to really settle in with the idea, settle in with the concept. But I want to talk to you a little bit about stories. And how many of you guys, you know, you can remember back when you were young, very young, when you used to sit there with your mother or with your father and you used to hear the stories, the bedtime stories. The stories that, you know, put you to sleep, that inspired you as young individuals. Maybe you were 6 years old, maybe you were 4 years old, lying in bed, and your mother was reading to you about your favorite bedtime story. Maybe you were remembering a time when you were hearing about Santa Claus. You know, maybe you were hearing about Santa Claus, and you know, when you were listening to that story, and you looked forward to those stories, it was really, that was where you were. You were there in the moment, weren't you? And the stories seemed real, didn't they? Raise your hand if you remember a story that you're thinking of right now that seemed real to you, that you looked forward to every single time you went to bed. And the point of that is that the stories were real to you. And for those of you that you know, believe in Santa Claus, cover your ears. But now you remember that Santa Claus didn't really exist, did he? It was a story. But he existed to you. And that was something that you looked forward to, and that was something that you loved hearing about. And, you know, those aren't the stories that we're going to talk to today, but the point of that is that they were real to you in that time. And you created your reality based on the information that was given to you from your parents. And I want to talk to you guys today a little bit about some of the stories that we talk about in the position that we're in right now. And you know, the power of stories are absolutely incredible because words hold meaning. Would you guys agree with me that words hold meaning? We believe a lot of the stories that we tell ourselves, don't we? It doesn't matter what they are. I believe it was Henry Ford who said, I think whether you think you can or think you can't, you're absolutely right. That's the story that you're telling yourself, and the more that you hear that story, the more that you believe that story. Say yes? Yes. Stories are very powerful, but more important than that, it's the words that we associate with the specific events that are taking place in our lives that in turn create those stories. And if we hear stories enough, if we hear that we're beautiful or we're handsome, or if a young girl hears that she's pretty over and over and over again, what does she soon start to believe? That she is what? Pretty. You know, Nick talks a lot about an example of someone who is shy. That person is shy because they've been told they were shy their entire lives, and they assumed and moved into that role, didn't they? And now they're shy continuously today. Words have power. Words hold meaning. But is it not up to us what meaning we choose to give a specific event that is taking place in our lives? We hold the power to be able to create the stories through the events that we're taking part in our lives every single day. You can be a part of one event, somebody else can be a part of the exact same event. Let's assume an example. Let's say maybe we see a bright shining light up in the sky. It's a tremendous light. It lights up the whole sky. We could have somebody on one side in California that looks at that light and they would say, "Oh my God, it's a UFO. We are under attack." And then somebody in Miami could see the same light. And they would look at that light and say, "Oh, isn't that beautiful? It's a shooting star." The same event happened, but the words that each of those individuals chose to associate to that event became their reality.
I'm sorry.
Because I'm sure you'll agree, 10 years from now, that guy in California, what's he talking about? He's still talking about those crazy UFOs that came and he saw them, isn't he? And the person in Miami is talking about something completely different. So make no mistake about it, the words that we choose to associate to events do hold power over the way that we feel for a certain event. You know, what are some of the stories that we tell ourselves in our business right now? Well, let's look at the biggest thing that we have. One of the biggest problems I know for myself that I had was coming up with excuses. Coming up with what, guys? Excuses. Coming up with what? Excuses. Does anybody here ever come up with an excuse? What about the people in the back corner over here? Do you guys ever come up with an excuse back over there? No? How about this side over here? Anybody ever come up with an excuse? Yeah? I know for me, I had excuses all the time. I failed and failed and failed and failed to the point where I was such a great failure that I had no choice but to eventually succeed. Because you couldn't fail anymore. And I had, for me, I had the story of what I like to call a professional victim. It was never my fault. It was absolutely never my fault. There was always some other reason why I had failed. Anybody here know anybody like that? Yeah? Maybe you've done it yourself. I know I was doing it all the time. I always had a reason why I was failing. Every single time. And it was never the person looking back at me in the mirror. It didn't matter what the event was. It didn't matter what was happening. I always found a way to take that event and to associate words to it that allowed me to not be the person who was responsible for failing. Does that make sense to you guys? You know, I was broke because I paid too much taxes. I was broke because there wasn't enough work that was out there. My skill set was out of date, so it's not my fault. If I had gone to school 2 years later after that, I would have learned this skill set now, and I would have taken off on that wave of all those people that are working right now. I was a victim. I was a professional victim. And when I was in network marketing, many of you who know my story know that, my network marketing story was that I failed and I struggled for years and years and years and years. I never made any money in network marketing. It wasn't from lack of trying. I tried extremely hard. I did everything that I was supposed to do, but I just couldn't make it work. But it was never my fault. It was always the fact that if there was this ingredient in the product, or if there was that ingredient in the product, or if the compensation plan had an extra point here, then I'd be rich. Then I'd make money. And we see a lot of people like this in our business, and maybe even, you yourself, you've thought of this in your current situation. Maybe you've thought that, well, if there was an extra percentage down here, then I'd be an ambassador. Right? That's not taking responsibility for where we're going and what you're doing. You're being a professional victim. I was being a professional victim. For anybody that thinks that way, it's all about being a victim. And what we've got to do is get a new story around the words that we're associating with that particular event. It's not that you're failing, or that I was failing, or that anybody fails ever in life because of a certain event. It always comes down to the words that we associate to that event. And for myself, I was always looking for reasons to fail. Because if I tried something and I failed at it, I wanted a sure justification as to why I failed. And a lot of times going into a scenario, I would set myself up to fail so that I had that justification. Has anybody ever surrounded themselves with somebody who would always look for reasons not to do something versus reasons to do something? Anybody have friends like that? Maybe you've even been that person?